As a child of the 80s and the 90s, I grew up watching action movies from Jean-Claude Van Damme, Dolph Lundgren, Jackie Chan, Jet Li, Bruce Willis. But there's no denial that the two kings of action movies from these 2 decades were Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone, both having 2 classic franchises in their careers. Arnold had Conan and the Terminator, and Stallone had Rambo and Rocky Balboa. But during their 2 amazing careers, did you know that there were many planned movies that were cancelled even before they were shot? Both Arnie and Sly had many interesting projects that could have happened if not for production problems. And since I have a fascination for these projects that could have been but were not, I dug many interesting trivia to blow your mind. So stick with me. My name is Gustavo, but you can call me Gus, and let me give you a quick message before we start talking about the movies. And if you love trashiness, old movies, cartoons, animes, more than any other person that I consider normal in this life, don't forget to subscribe to this channel right now, cause the Trashing with Gus is your house. And let's go back to the 80s and start with Mr. Stallone. And the first interesting and bizarre information is that the movie Beverly Hills Cop that was starred by Eddie Murphy was originally supposed to be starred by Stallone. But when the project was in his hands, it was much less comedic and had more action. But this changed with the casting of Eddie Murphy. So Stallone took those ideas and brought them to Cobra, his official cop movie. So if you wanted to know how Beverly Hills Cop would have been with Stallone as Axel Foley, it's kinda like Cobra. Then in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a project called Isobar, which was a kind of Alien meets a futuristic train movie. It was a famous action script in Hollywood, and it had also a mixture of sci-fi with horror. And the plot was kinda simple. Sylvester Stallone was supposed to be a passenger in the train, and he was going to be the hero of the story. And he had to face a genetically created creature that was being transported in this train. The movie would also have the actress Kim Basinger as his love interest. And the script passed by the hands of Ridley Scott, the director of Alien. And the production was really going in a very advanced stage, with Scott inviting the wonderful designer H.R. Giger, the guy who designed the alien creature, and he was supposed to design some concepts for this movie, including the futuristic train where the plot would happen. Plus, we would have also the wonderful makeup designer Rick Baker creating the concept of the creature that was supposed to be this octopus thing that had many tentacles. What canceled the project was the old creative differences. Ridley Scott was the first to exit the production, then everybody also started to leave. But before its final cancellation, the project fell into the hands of Roland Emmerich, director of Independence Day, right after he directed the movie Moon 44, a movie that I spoke very recently in one of my videos here in the channel. So I will leave the link right here if you want to watch it. But in the end, the directors and the producers didn't come to a conclusion for what the movie was supposed to be. So the only things left from the project were the designs of Rick Baker and of the train conceived by Giger, which it was reused some years later in the movie Species, in a dream sequence where the character from the movie Seal is running away from this train in her nightmare. Then in the early 90s, there was another project called Gale Force, which it was described as Die Hard in a Hurricane. There aren't many details about this one, but we can guess that it was a movie with a hero that fights terrorists in a place surrounded by hurricanes. The movie was supposed to be directed by Rennie Harlin, a guy that directed many cool movies like Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, Die Hard 2, and also left many famous projects, like he was the first director to be hired for Alien 3 and left the production. He also said no to direct two great classics like Speed and the Pierce Brosnan James Bond movie GoldenEye. so he was also good in committing some mistakes. But I think the movie Gale Force ended up being the movie Cliffhanger that was starred by Stallone and also directed by Rennie Harlin. But instead of having a hero fighting terrorists in a hurricane, we have a hero fighting terrorists in some ice mountains. Now moving to Arnie, his first probable big cancelled project was a third part in the trilogy of Conan. There always have been talks that after the second movie in the franchise, Conan the Destroyer, there would have been a third Conan named King Conan. But this project never happened, and he ended up doing a kinda somewhat Conan character in the movie Red Sonja that I've never actually watched, but I think it's kinda bizarre that he has done a character that looks exactly like Conan in this movie, but is not Conan at all, and is actually a side character since the main character is Red Sonja, played by Stallone's ex-wife Brigitte Nielsen. Although the idea of the project is still being discussed to this day, even with Arnold in his 70s. And apparently the screenwriter Chris Morgan from the Fast and the Furious franchise wrote a version of the script in the 2010s, but no word has been said if the project will go on or not. I personally still want to see this happen, and I think it's even more interesting to have a older Conan as a main character than the young Conan that we would have in the 80s if this movie was done in that time. But still in the 80s, there was a project that was going to be directed by the wonderful Stuart Gordon, director that I mentioned many times in this channel, especially in the videos about Robot Jocks, a movie about giant fighting robots. That is the same video that I talk about Moon 44, and Dolls, a wonderful Killer Dolls movie that I made a very special video about, and I will leave the link right here if you wanna watch it. He had a project named Berserker, and this one I found the story very recently. The story was about an athlete that used steroids, but the consequences of the steroids in his body were a little different from the usual, and he ends up having a choice to make: stop using steroids and die, or continue to use them and become a big monstrous creature. Yes, it was a very bizarre plot, but I imagine that was supposed to be something like a body horror movie like The Fly. The project didn't go ahead because Arnold's agent called Stuart Gordon and said that he was not very interested in playing villains anymore after The Terminator. So some years passed, and his next big project could have been a version of Judge Dredd, a character that was played by Stallone in the end. The first version of the script was written by Peter Briggs, a guy that I mentioned in this channel when he wrote the first version of Aliens vs. Predator. But since the project changed a lot to become a Stallone vehicle, the opportunity to return to the Predator franchise came up for Arnie, right after the second movie that wasn't starred by him. And the guy that was called to write the first version of Predator 3 was Robert Rodriguez, the guy who directed El Mariachi and Desperado. Apparently, he had an initial conversation with Arnold to talk about the movie, and the only direction that Schwarzenegger gave him was, "We gotta go back to the jungle." I'm sorry, that's my Arnold impersonation. So Rodriguez took this idea and wrote a script that I actually have read recently, and I must say that is quite bizarre. And yes, the movie was supposed to take place back in the jungle, but now in an alien planet, and for some reason in a very distant future, with spaceships and futuristic stuff. Which is weird, because the movie would feature the return of Dutch Schaefer, the character of Arnold. But the first movie took place in our time, so why this third movie had this time jump, it's not explained. Anyway, in the story, the character would go to the Predator's planet, this time with a futuristic military group that had some Predator tech. But there they would find a planet filled with creatures and filled with predators. Too many. In fact, we would have scenes with gladiator fights with predators. Seriously, it was very bizarre and actually was quite bad. And for having so many predators and so many creatures and too many futuristic stuff, I can imagine the studio exec looking at the script and going, nope, too expensive, forget about it. And the script did something quite offensive to the franchise, in my opinion. It said that the Predator in the first movie was a rookie, that's why Schwarzenegger was able to defeat him so easily. Bullshit. Thank God this movie was never done, but it was adapted to become Predators from 2010. Also written by Robert Rodriguez, but this time with a less crazy plot and without Arnie. Although they tried to get him to cameo in each of the new movies, except for the last one called Prey. That was an excellent movie. As everybody knows, these cameos never worked, but he did make his return as Dutch in the game Predator: Hunting Grounds, where the character was voiced by Schwarzenegger himself. So if you wanted to know how a Predator 3 would be with Schwarzenegger back, there you go. But the great project that would never come to be for Arnie was a big epic of swords called Crusade, that was supposed to be released in the mid-90s. A movie that was going to be directed by the incredible Paul Verhoeven, a guy that for me directed the best unofficial and unconnected sci-fi trilogy of all time, with RoboCop, Total Recall, and Starship Troopers, a great movie about space battles, but also a big critique to fascism. This movie Crusade would come right after True Lies and Junior in Arnie's career, and it would probably be his most expensive movie in terms of budget. It had a finished script that all the studios loved, so much so that the production was going forward with some names in the cast as the side characters. We would have Gary Sinise, John Turturro, Charlton Heston, and Jennifer Connelly as possibly Arnie's main love interest. The story was about a thief that was going to be hanged for his crimes by stealing gold, but he manages to burn his own back with a burning cross and fool everybody that was watching his execution, including the Pope, by saying that the mark was a divine act. Then he was let go of his execution, but at the same time, he was given the mission to lead the Crusades. The movie would be violent, full of gore and blood, and R-rated as any of Paul Verhoeven's movies. The movie didn't go ahead because of its crazy budget, and Paul Verhoeven wanted to shoot everything for real, including a battle scene with 600 real horses and knights. Something that his stunt coordinator said, "There's no way you can bring 600 horses to the set, Paul. Somebody's going to get or hurt or killed by accident." And now allow me to do my Paul Verhoeven's impression because he has a very funny voice. So how many horses can we bring to the set? The stunt coordinator answered, 300 is good enough. Then Paul Verhoeven went back home, and in the next day, not only he didn't accept the suggestion, but he wanted more horses on set. Now I want 800 horses in the big battle scene. And this is just one of the crazy things that end up in the cancellation of the movie. Another situation was when Paul Verhoeven and Arnold Schwarzenegger went to the producers to convince them that the movie could be done within the budget without going over it. One of the execs asked Verhoeven, "Can you give me guarantees that you won't go over budget?" And the director said, "Guarantees? There's no such thing as guarantees. If someone gives you any guarantees in this life, this person is lying. I cannot guarantee you anything. I cannot guarantee that I will leave this building walking down the street and not be hit by a car. Not even God can give you guarantees. By the way, I don't even believe in God. Why am I speaking about God?" And allegedly, Schwarzenegger was kicking him under the table and saying, "Shut up. Just say what the man wants to hear. But then it was too late. The studio had already decided to cancel the film. And that's very sad because this could have been a mark in Arnie's career. So then he went to do some less crazy productions like Eraser and the Christmas classic Jingle All the Way. His next big budget production was Batman and Robin. And speaking about Batman, in the video that I talked about movie crossovers that you can see right here on the screen, is a very good video, so I hope you like it. I mentioned a very famous short movie called Batman Dead End that had Batman fighting the Predator and the alien in the same story. This short movie became very famous in the year 2000, and for its low budget, it was very good. But the director of the short, Sandy Colora, had the idea that his first choice to play the Batman in the movie would be none other than Sylvester Stallone. And I tell you even more, he got to meet Stallone and offer him the part. And Stallone, that being a fan of Batman, and who isn't, looks at Sandy Colora, then looks at the script and said,
"Okay, kid. Let's do this."
So just stop and think for a minute. We could have lived in a world where Stallone had already been Batman at some point of his career. This is mind-blowing. So because Stallone had already committed to the role, Mark Hamill, our famous Luke Skywalker that voices Joker in the animations, also committed to play the Joker in the short movie. So things were gearing up to be an epic event. Because just think about it. We could have Stallone's Batman fighting the Predator and the alien, besides the fact that Predator had already fought Schwarzenegger in the past. Models with Stallone's head for the cowl of Batman got to be made for the production, but in the last minute, Stallone's lawyers called him and said, "I think you're better not do this." That old copyright story, because a big studio with the rights of such big property would never let a small, short fan film with a huge star like Stallone playing Batman to happen without any legal repercussions. So right when Sandy Colora was going to Stallone's house to make some more models for his cowl, Stallone called him and said,
"Well, kid, I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore."
So that was sad, but the actor that was hired to play Batman was a lesser-known actor named Clark Bartram, who did an exceptional job anyway. Around the 90s, a great action movie was released called Face Off, starring Nicolas Cage and John Travolta, directed by John Woo, the Hong Kong master of action movies, who I am a big fan of. And this was a great movie because it had equal roles for both the leads, who played the hero and the villain. But before Nicolas Cage and John Travolta were cast in the roles, there were many other actors considered for this movie, like Michael Douglas and Harrison Ford, other big names, but the two first actors considered were none other than Arnold and Sly. And that would be amazing in my opinion. I wish I could have seen this version of the movie, but it begs the question of who would actually play the villain and the hero here. Remember that both Schwarzenegger and Stallone had very big egos in the 90s, so it was difficult to see them playing villains, especially Stallone, who only played a villain, I think, in the movie Spy Kids 3, kind of. And at the late 90s, there was another cancelled project that could have been a hit in Schwarzenegger's career, and probably one of my favorites in this list that I wish I could have seen. And this movie got very far in the stages of the production that we even got to feel a taste of it. I'm talking about I Am Legend with Arnold Schwarzenegger. That it would be directed by Ridley Scott, a director that I already mentioned in this video, and that directed Alien and Blade Runner. Yes, it's the same I Am Legend of Will Smith that we got to see many years later, but the first version was supposed to be starred by Schwarzenegger in the year 1999, probably. I am a huge fan of Richard Matheson's I Am Legend book, and one of the things that I remember by reading it is that the main character's appearance kinda remind me of an old Arnold Schwarzenegger, something that ended up happening many years later in his career in the movie Maggie, a movie that he plays a father of a girl who is turning into a zombie. By the way, this movie is a very interesting one and unusual for his career, since it's not an action movie, and it's much more of a drama. So I Am Legend kinda have these drama tones to it, but with a much more faithful character to his description in the book. Like I said, the film went very far in the stages of production, and makeup tests done for the zombie-like creatures in the story were already being created. You can see by these photos here, and I thought they were very interesting and very sinister. Taking into consideration that I Am Legend with Will Smith had all the zombies created by CGI, I thought that element made the movie shot itself in the foot, because this destroyed the element of visceral and intimidation of these creatures. And as far as we can see in these test photos, there's no argument about it. It would have been much better. Anyway, the project was cancelled because of budget. Too expensive, and details of the script were not being agreed between Ridley Scott and the studio. So he decided to leave and direct Gladiator, which was a good movie for his career. But quite sad for Arnie again, because he lost another probable big hit in a very interesting movie. And going back to Stallone, right after the release of Rambo 4, which should have been the last movie in the franchise for me, there should never have been a Rambo 5, there were initial talks about what the probable sequel would be. And one of the first concepts of story that the producers thought for the movie would be based on a book called Hunter. And this is one of my favorite pieces of trivia in this video. The book is about a group of military soldiers that go down the forest to hunt a genetically created beast that is quite furious and a killer. And yes, if you make 2 plus 2, that's exactly what the story would be about. Rambo was going down the forest with this group of military soldiers to hunt this beast in a mixture of what would have been a kind of a Predator versus Rambo, but with a genetically created beast instead. And I know what you're going to say. This has nothing to do with the Rambo franchise, but I cannot deny that my trash lover side would love to have seen this movie. Can you imagine Rambo hunting a beast in the forest? That element itself has some kind of visceral thing to it, and that is kind of attractive to me. Anyway, someone with a little more conscience than me and the guy who came up with this idea cancelled the project before it even started. And to finish it up, one of the most interesting ideas that Stallone had since the beginning of his career that he wanted to do a movie about was a biography of the famous writer Edgar Allan Poe, creator of many Gothic tales. And this would have been right at ground zero in the beginning of his career, and he wanted to sell this idea to the studios as a movie that would have him playing the main character, Poe. He even took some photos at the time as himself dressed as the character. And he still talks about doing this project till this day, but only as a director now, because he's too old to play the part. But he already talked about the possibility of some actors like Robert Downey Jr. playing the main role. I think this would be a very interesting move for him, especially because it would be very different from everything he has done in his career, in a movie that could be better suited for a guy like Tim Burton, because of the gothic nature of the project. But I would love to see Sly taking a crack at it, showing his more sensitive and dramatic style. Anyway, I could talk more about other curiosities, like if Arnold Schwarzenegger had refused to play Mr. Freeze in Batman and Robin, the director Joel Schumacher said that his second choice would be Stallone. Oh my god. And that even with Arnold's cancelled I Am Legend, he got to play a similar role in an apocalyptic movie called End of Days, where he faces the devil. And if you wanted to see how he would look like in this movie, there you go. That's the movie that would come closer to it. But we did get to see these two legends together in the movie Escape Plan, a prison movie that is quite interesting and fun, but not memorable at all. And let's not forget, of course, about the Expendables franchise that is just pure 80s style action fun. And then comes the conclusion. Are there any future projects of both these legends that we can get excited about? Well, Arnie said that he will never play the Terminator again. Maybe because the last movies were, well, let's forget about them. But he would love to take a crack in a sequel for Twins, that classic Ivan Reitman comedy from the 80s, where he plays the twin brother of Danny DeVito, but this time the movie would be called Triplets, with Eddie Murphy joining as a third twin brother. And for Stallone, he still has the rights for the book Hunter, which he said he would love to still do a movie that is not connected to the Rambo franchise, but that would adapt this book. There are also rumblings that he will make 2 sequels to 2 hits of the 90s, Cliffhanger and Demolition Man, which I'm not sure that they will happen or they should happen, but I'm keen to see them. But whatever the future may hold for these two legends, they have already given us the most amazing action movies of the 80s and the 90s, and we can only thank them for that. So did you like this video? What movie would you like to have seen becoming truth in both of their careers? Comment below, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a like in this video. Also, don't forget to check my ebook on the site of Amazon, The Angel of Fire and Steel, a big epic adventure that is quite dark and takes place in hell with a demon as the hero of the story. If you like dark, epic adventures, cyberpunk, sci-fi with a lot of action and blood, guts, and metal, please check the link in the description below, and if you buy this book, I'm sure you're gonna love this story. By the way, I have already received some positive reviews from readers, and I am very happy about this. So if you like this kind of story, this is the book for you. So this is it for now. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next Trashing with Gus, and bye bye.